Have you ever looked back on something that seemed small at the time but realised that actually it changed everything? This could be a conversation or a decision or an event or just a coincidence. Anything that felt ordinary at the time but in hindsight became significant. This lesson is not just all about that shift in perception, but how we can actually learn to notice these moments as they are happening. We're going to have a look at it first of all objectively, and then we're going to have a look at it subjectively. Same thing in two different ways. It's the objective side of the question that initially prompted the idea for this video, especially the questionable usage of the word miracle that I came across, as we'll see in a second. And then I want to whiz through this part because of the subjective part, which is, for me, I think, way more important. So, the British mathematician John Littlewood called a 1 in a million event a miracle, as we can see by this quote, which I'm just going to put up on the screen, by Freeman Dyson, the physicist. John Littlewood defined a miracle as an event that has special importance when it occurs, but occurs with a probability of 1 in a million. This definition agrees with our common sense understanding of the word miracle. So, in common everyday language, if we follow Littlewood's idea, then when we say something has a 1 in a million chance of happening, we essentially just mean it is extremely rare. Something so unlikely to happen that it's not even worth thinking about. Unfairly, this 1 in a million chance has also taken on a shorthand, sort of descriptive term of miracle. And I'm making this really, really clear early on. I have taught religion and philosophy for over 10 years, so I am fully aware of the enormous theological complexity around the word miracle. I am not talking here about the deep mysteries in this video, but instead something that most people are going to be using in terms of everyday language to refer to the idea that a miracle or a once-in-a-lifetime event or something extremely rare refers to basically the same thing. The focus here is on something which is quite interesting when you do some quite basic maths, because it turns out rare in the moment actually becomes quite expected given a long enough time frame. And this idea was prompted by this book, Same as Ever. And on page 44 of it, there's a lovely little quote, again, which is sort of what prompted all this to begin with, just carrying on this idea from Freeman Dyson. In any normal person's life, miracles should occur at the rate of roughly 1 per month. The proof of the law is simple. During the time that we are awake and actively engaged in living our lives, roughly for 8 hours each day, we see and hear things happening at a rate of 1 per second. So, the total number of events that happen to us is about 30,000 per day, or about 1 million per month. So, let's break this down, because, like I say, this is very much admittedly questionable maths, but at the very least, we've got 60 seconds in a minute. You times that by 60 minutes in 1 hour, and you're awake and active for about 8 hours a day by his understanding, which comes to 28,800 seconds in a day. You multiply that by 30, and you basically end up with 864,000 events a month. Close enough to a million for the sake of this. So by sheer probability, something with a 1 in a million chance should actually happen about once a month, according to Dyson. And remember, that's just taking into account an active 8 hours a day. Now, is each of those events meaningful? No, probably not. This is very just loose maths. But the point is this. What we think of as wildly unlikely, subjectively, might actually be statistically extremely likely given a large enough sample size objectively. So I'll make that clear just on the screen as well with these labels. This is known, by the way, as Littlewood's law, if you want to take this further, and it's connected to what's called the law of truly large numbers, which basically says that given enough chances, even the rarest events are pretty much guaranteed to happen, just given the appropriate enough time frame. So what does this actually mean for us? Well, it means that rare events, those 1 in a million miracles, they're not just possible, they're actually expected. So the real question for this video that I want to explore is, how do we live in a way that's open to them? How can we maximize the chances of turning any one of these events into the 1 in a million event? That's the real focus of this. So what we need to do is to learn how to practice being more open to serendipity, to encourage an openness of mind to notice these monthly miracles as they are actually occurring. So we don't want to just spot them in hindsight saying, oh, it was there at that place at that time. We need to be open in the present moment to the unexpected. So we need to be patient, we need to be curious, and we need to be alert to these opportunities, because more important than that still, we actually need to be resilient, to keep showing up even if we don't feel like it. And by making this a habit and a practice, then statistically we put ourselves in a good footing there to take advantage of that miracle moment. So that leads us on to the next and the inevitable question. Well, how do you actually do that? How do you change your perspective of an event that is happening whilst it is still happening? Well, at this point, I'm going to pass back over to our good friend on this channel, Dr. Viktor Frankl, and I've recommended this book before and I'm going to recommend it again. So it is The Unheard Cry for Meaning, and there is this lovely little analogy on page 45 and 46. And I just want to draw this out to make it really, really clear. If we draw a cylinder like this, then we can take two very different cross sections from the same shape. You can split this horizontally, first of all, like this. Hopefully this will turn up and make sense. And in that case there, if you split it like this, you'll end up with a circle as a little cross-section. Now, if you do it instead vertically, you're going to get something extremely different. You're going to get a shape that looks a lot more like this. Hopefully this is going to come across in a 3D kind of way. So if we to separate the two things like this, you're going to get two completely different shapes that come from the exact same object. The same source, it's different perspectives. So depending on how we look at the exact same shape, we can take the view of a circle or an open-ended cup at any given point. And on a practical level, depending on how we look at the exact same event, we could then start to take the view of it being ordinary or miraculous. It could be mundane or meaningful. When we realize that these two very different conclusions come from the exact same premise, we can realize that they're actually compatible with each other, even if they don't seem it at first. And maturity is realizing that an event can be considered both mundane and special at the exact same time. An expected event, but also a rare event, without needing to categorize it as one to the detriment of the other. So think back to some moments that have stood out to you from the previous month. What were the small, maybe mundane moments that didn't seem like much at the time, but actually could have had a deeper significance? These could be thoughts or feelings or intuitions or insights or just little things that you've noticed that you normally overlook. It's these moments that become the 1 in a million miracle events that we referred to earlier on. And perhaps they already were miracle events, but they were just being overlooked. Maybe they were there waiting for you to turn them into miracle events. Again, it's another way of viewing the same thing. Viktor Frankl himself puts a lot of focus on attitude being a key value to practice in our lives. So perhaps it is up to us to make these miracle events from the raw materials of our experience. So we've got two ways to look at this. We've got objective ways of looking at it. So that's how we started this video, mathematically and statistically expecting a 1 in a million event. Or subjectively, where we decide to transform something that has already happened or is already happening from a mundane event to a 1 in a million event. These are two very different approaches to the exact same question, but either way, we can still expect the apparently rare occurrence to happen on a monthly basis. And personally, I find it really reassuring to know that as long as I focus on what is in my control, then I can be open to serendipity and the unknown on a daily basis without having to pretend that I'm in control of everything. I just need to focus on a few things, which is my resilience, as in just keep showing up, my openness, my patience, my attitude, and my curiosity. It's the same things I mentioned before. And if I can stay in the game long enough, then rare events become the norm. I know it's a classic cliche phrase for anything that consistency is the key, but I hope with this, then this little reframing helps to let that advice just sink in that little bit deeper. So I appreciate that this is a very different way of viewing the world, and this definitely hasn't been my cleanest video by any stretch, but these thoughts have come to me from these two books. One, which is The Same as Ever, and this other one from The Unheard Cry for Meaning, just to put them on the screen. Two books I've already mentioned on this channel, and they are both very different books, written for very different reasons, but there is definitely an overlap in themes, especially around this idea of like a good or a fulfilling life. My mind at the minute is on overdrive, trying to do all the maths and all different kind of events, especially in the long run. So before I go a little bit insane on this, I am just going to leave this lesson here. I appreciate that this was prompted by a bit of a strange idea to begin with compared to my usual videos on this channel, but the maths and the definitions really grabbed me, so I thought at the very least I'd pass it on and just see what you thought. All right, see you in a future lesson.